Have you ever been discarded like you never mattered? You gave your time, your care, your loyalty, and in one day, they walked away as if you were just a chapter that could be skipped. You sit in the quiet, trying to understand how someone could erase you so easily. But here's the truth no one tells you. Silence isn't weakness, it's power. When you stop explaining, when you stop proving your worth to people who already decided not to see it, you begin to reclaim something far more valuable than their attention. Your peace. In this video, we'll explore the Stoic art of silence. Not the silence of defeat, but of discipline. The kind that confuses those who expected you to break. The kind that restores your dignity. The kind that makes them feel your absence louder than your presence ever did. And at the end, I'll share a Stoic rule so powerful it can make even those who wronged you question their control over you. So stay until the end, because this isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming yourself, quietly. There's a moment after they walk away when everything in the world sounds too loud, even the quiet. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could switch you off like a song they got tired of hearing. You replay every word, every glance, searching for that one mistake you think could have changed the ending. And when you can't find it, the silence begins to whisper ugly things. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was easy to forget. That's the cruel trick of abandonment. It makes you think their decision defines your worth. It doesn't. It only reveals what kind of peace they couldn't handle. You check your phone even when you know there's nothing there. You read old messages, hoping context will bring comfort, but it only deepens the ache. Your mind becomes a courtroom, replaying evidence that never mattered to begin with. But this is where Stoicism begins, not in victory, but in that unbearable pause between reaction and realization. Epictetus said, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings, not as blame, but as redirection. Because pain has a strange way of showing you what's left to master inside yourself, and as the noise fades, the silence you once feared starts to sound different. Not empty, but sacred. It's not there to punish you, it's there to rebuild you. To the Stoics, silence was a weapon forged from discipline. They believed the loudest person in the room usually had the weakest control of themselves. True strength wasn't measured by how much noise you made, but by how little you needed to explain. Marcus Aurelius led armies and empires, yet wrote nightly reflections on patience, ego, and restraint. He knew that power expressed through silence unsettles those addicted to chaos. Because silence means you no longer need to prove you're right. You simply are. When someone discards you, they expect noise. They expect a reaction to confirm their importance. Anger, tears, confusion, anything that says, "You still have me." But when you go quiet, you flip the story. You show that their opinion is just weather, not climate. It may storm for a while, but it will pass. The Stoics call this self-containment, the art of keeping your energy where it belongs. It's not coldness, it's sovereignty. It's knowing that losing someone is painful, but losing yourself is fatal. And so, your silence isn't indifference. It's the refusal to waste words on those who stop listening. It's the decision to protect your dignity from cheap validation. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Seneca wrote, "He who is calm disturbs the unsteady." It's one of those truths you only understand once you've been broken and survived it. The people who left expected to forget you, but calmness has a gravity of its own. It pulls on their conscience, it echoes in their quiet moments. Stoic silence doesn't exist to make others suffer. That would still give them power. Its purpose is purification. It's the act of separating what you can control, your actions, your peace, your dignity, from what you cannot. When you stop explaining, life starts clarifying. You no longer need closure from those who couldn't offer understanding. You realize closure isn't something they give. It's something you choose. Your silence becomes your decoration. I am no longer participating in confusion. It's not revenge. It's release. And paradoxically, that release makes people remember you in ways noise never could. Because silence lingers. It forces reflection. It commands respect in a world addicted to attention. This is what the Stoics meant when they said serenity was a kind of rebellion. Your peace becomes your protest. Your calm becomes your power. And what once felt like abandonment begins to look like deliverance. The moment you were discarded, you didn't expect it to end like that. Maybe it came as a sudden message, or a long silence that said everything without saying a word. One day they were part of your rhythm, and the next, it's as if you never existed. You search for a logic, because the mind can survive almost anything except not knowing why. The betrayal isn't just in their absence, it's in how easy it seemed for them. How effortless it was for them to delete the moments you still carry in your chest. You wonder, did I mean nothing? Was I ever seen at all? But here's the raw truth. Their ease doesn't define your worth. It only reveals their depth. People who abandon easily have never learned to value permanence. Their comfort comes from escaping, not connecting. You, however, have the harder gift, the ability to feel deeply, to hold space for meaning. And yes, that hurts more, but that's also where growth hides. Epictetus once said, "When you are offended at another's wrong, turn to yourself and consider where you have gone wrong." He didn't mean blame yourself. He meant reclaim your control. You can't control how others exit your life, but you can decide how their absence will shape you. Let it refine you, not ruin you. The moment you're discarded, your first instinct is to reach out, to explain, to defend, to be heard. You think if you just say the right thing, they'll understand. But they won't. Not because your words lack truth, but because their heart is already closed. And so you start crafting messages you never send, rehearsing arguments that will never happen. You scroll through old photos, have out of pain, have out of hope. It's not madness. It's grief trying to make sense of what feels senseless. But every time you engage with that phantom, you reopen the wound. You trade your peace for a conversation that doesn't exist. The Stoics call this attachment to externals, the addiction to control outcomes that were never yours to begin with. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been." It sounds almost impossible in moments like this, but he wasn't dismissing pain. He was teaching that even heartbreak is a chance to practice mastery. Because silence here isn't cowardice, it's resistance. It's saying, you no longer get access to my energy. The more you chase what's left, the smaller you become. The moment you stop, truly stop, the energy you were giving away begins to flow back. That's when your healing starts to hum quietly beneath the ache. The day you were discarded was not the day you were destroyed. It was the day you were revealed. When everything familiar collapses, what's left is the core of who you are when no one is watching. That's where Stoicism begins, in the rubble of expectation, in the silence after loss. You might think you're falling apart, but you're actually falling into yourself. The world strips you down so that you can finally see what cannot be taken. Your dignity, your awareness, your ability to respond instead of react. Epictetus knew this intimately. Born a slave, beaten, dismissed, yet his mind was untouched. He discovered that freedom isn't physical, it's internal. And that's what you're learning now, through pain. How to be free, even when you're not chosen. Take this moment not as rejection, but as redirection. Their absence carved out a space for something sacred. Your silence, your stillness, your strength. When the noise leaves, peace finally has room to arrive. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's unfair. But the Stoics would remind you, the wound is where wisdom begins. What you lost was temporary attention. What you're gaining is eternal calm. And that's the kind of power no one can discard. Why silence is the Stoic response. You live in a world that rewards reaction. If someone hurts you, everyone tells you to say something. Get closure. Make them see what they lost. But every reaction, every message, every argument, every attempt to explain is a gift of energy to the person who already chooses to stop valuing it. You become tied to the very thing you're trying to escape. The Stoics call this the chain of impulse, the instant urge to respond before reason has returned. Epictetus warned, when you're insulted, you must realize that it is your opinion that insults you, meaning no one's words or silence can truly hurt you unless you decide they matter. This is why silence, though difficult, is the first act of freedom. It's not submission, it's sovereignty. When you choose not to react, you're declaring that your peace is not up for a negotiation. In that stillness, you'll notice something strange. The world expects noise. When you don't provide it, people get uncomfortable. They start questioning themselves, their choices, even their strength. Because your calm exposes their chaos. So, when your instinct screams to react, don't. That pause is where your power lives. The Stoics knew, the one who controls their reaction controls the story. Silence, to the Stoic, was not emptiness. It was containment, the art of holding power without spilling it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. In that single line lies the core of Stoic silence, energy reclaimed. When you respond impulsively, you spend energy on things you cannot control, their thoughts, their feelings, their story of you. But when you stay silent, that energy circulates inward. It sharpens your clarity, deepens your dignity, and restores your sense of self. The modern world confuses loudness with strength, but volume has never been proof of value. A whisper from a centered soul carries farther than a scream from a wounded one. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects the imbalance of others, and that reflection can be more haunting than any argument. Remember, silence is not about pretending you're unaffected. It's about deciding you won't perform your pain for an audience that doesn't deserve the show. It's your refusal to hand over your composure as evidence of your suffering. Each quiet breath becomes a meditation. This is mine. My mind, my calm, my control. And in that repetition, peace becomes a habit instead of a hope. The Stoics believed that virtue was the only true power, and silence was virtue in motion. It's restraint practiced out loud. It's the discipline to act only when action aligns with principle, not emotion. Seneca wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is more hurtful than the injury that provokes it." He understood that the real damage of betrayal often comes from our own reaction to it. When you lash out, you let the wound define your behavior. But when you stay silent, you define the meaning of the wound yourself. Silence doesn't mean you approve. It means you've outgrown the need to participate. It's what the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakable peace. You stop being pulled by the gravity of others' chaos. The people who left will mistake your calm for indifference. But that's because they've never met someone who no longer needs validation to feel alive. They'll project guilt, wonder, maybe even respect, all reactions to their own imbalance reflected through your steadiness. In silence, you're not invisible. You're radiant in a quieter way. It's the kind of power that doesn't announce itself, it emanates. And those who once discarded you will eventually feel its weight. Not through your words, but through the peace they can't disturb anymore. The effect your silence creates when you go silent, something unexpected happens. The story they told themselves about you begins to collapse. They thought you would beg, argue, or chase anything to confirm that they still mattered. But when you don't respond, the mirror flips. Your silence reflects their choices back at them. They start hearing echoes of their own words, their own actions, without your voice there to drown it out. The absence of your reaction becomes an uncomfortable presence, and it whispers louder than any confrontation ever could. This is what you created. Humans can run from accountability, but not from reflection. And that's what silence gives them, reflection without permission. It forces them to fill the void you left with their own thoughts, to sit with what they've done without the comfort of your forgiveness. The Stoics would say this is not revenge, but balance. Nature corrects itself through stillness, not chaos. When you stay calm, the universe begins to do the explaining for you. Remember, silence isn't about punishing someone. It's about refusing to carry what isn't yours anymore. It's the point where their story ends, and yours begins again. At first, they'll feel relief. Your silence seems like indifference, an easy ending. But time, as the Stoics knew, reveals the truth beneath all illusions. What once felt like freedom begins to taste like loss. Without your voice to argue or your presence to absorb their chaos, they're left alone with the echo of their own decisions. That's when guilt seeps in. It doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly in the spaces where your reaction used to live. They'll start to wonder, why aren't they reaching out? Did I matter less than I thought? Have they really moved on? And that's when they begin to realize the power they thought they had was never real. Because control only exists when it's acknowledged. The moment you stop reacting, their control dissolves. They lose the emotional leverage they built on your vulnerability. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "To bear trials with a calm mind robs misfortune of its strength and burden. That calmness, your silence, robs them of the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. They may never apologize. They may never admit regret, but they will feel it. Not because you force it, but because your peace became the evidence of what they lost." Silence doesn't just affect them, it transforms you. Every day you choose not to react, your energy returns to its rightful owner. At first, it feels like emptiness. Then, one morning, you wake up lighter. The thoughts that once consumed you now pass like passing weather. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." You start mastering yourself, your tone, your time, your attention. You realize that peace isn't found in being understood. It's found in not needing to explain. The more you protect your silence, the more sacred it becomes. You stop chasing closure, because you see it was never something they could give. You stop explaining pain, because it's no longer your language. You start living differently, slower, calmer, deliberate, and something subtle begins to happen. The world starts responding to your calm the way it once responded to your chaos. Opportunities open. People respect your boundaries. Your energy becomes rarer, and therefore more valuable. This is the moment Stoicism becomes real. Not a philosophy, but a lifestyle. Silence ceases to be defense. It becomes identity. You are no longer defined by what left you, but by what you refuse to lose. Your peace. Reclaiming your inner power, there comes a moment when you finally stop fighting the silence. It doesn't happen all at once, more like a slow surrender to what's already true. At first, you think you're giving up, but later, you realize you're simply giving in to peace. You wake up one day, and the urge to check your phone is gone. The need to be seen, to be chosen, to be understood. It begins to fade. The quiet that once felt like punishment now feels like permission. Permission to exist without performance. Permission to rest from trying. The Stoics call this euthymia, the tranquility that comes from walking your own path without comparing. it to anyone else's. It's the freedom that begins when you stop needing closure from the same people who caused the confusion. Epictetus said, when you want to please others, you are no longer free. He wasn't warning against kindness. He was warning against dependence. When your peace depends on another's reaction, you hand them the remote control to your emotions. But when you sit in silence, even for a few breaths, you realize no one can touch you there. That space inside you, the one beyond judgment, beyond approval, that's your fortress. The moment you stop chasing, you start returning to your rhythm, your focus, your wholeness. You realize that what left you was not your peace, it was your distraction. And now, you can finally hear the steady pulse of your own life again, unfiltered, uninterrupted, undeniably yours. That's not weakness. That's reclamation. That's the first breath of power returning home. Pain doesn't just test you, it trains you. Every ache, every restless night, every unanswered question becomes a weight your soul lifts until it grows stronger. This is what Stoicism truly is, not the absence of feeling, but the refinement of it. When Seneca lost his wealth and his friends turned on him, he didn't drown in bitterness. He wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." That's the paradox of growth. You only find your edge when the world stops cushioning you. Pain teaches you where your attention belongs. It shows you how often you tried to control the uncontrollable, how often you traded peace for proximity. When you stop fighting it and start studying it, pain becomes an instructor more honest than any comfort could ever be. Silence becomes your training ground. Every time you resist the urge to react, you're building discipline. Every time you breathe through the tension instead of texting through it, you're reclaiming focus. You begin to see your emotions not as storms to survive, but as weather to observe. And slowly, very slowly, you start choosing your response over your reflex. That's mastery, the space between impulse and intention. The Stoics knew it's not about feeling less. It's about feeling wisely. You still care, you still love, you still ache, but you stopped letting those feelings dictate your worth. In that restraint, you discover freedom. And in that freedom, you find an entirely new version of yourself. One forged not from what you gained, but from what you learned to let go. There's a kind of peace that feels almost supernatural when you first experience it. It's not loud or euphoric. It's the quiet realization that nothing external can truly disturb you anymore. People can leave, rumors can spread, doors can close, but inside, you remain steady. Marcus Aurelius called this inner citadel a fortress built from awareness, acceptance, and alignment. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And that's the peace you've been unknowingly building through all this silence. At first, you might not even recognize it. You just notice small things. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't chase apologies that won't come. You no longer feel the need to prove you've moved on. Because you have. Your silence has changed frequency. It no longer hides pain. It radiates balance. People can sense it in your tone, your walk, the way you no longer need to fill every gap with noise. You've learned to trust that calm is not the absence of power, but the highest form of it. And here's the most beautiful part. Once you find this peace, you become impossible to manipulate. Because what can they take from someone who no longer needs anything from them? You stop being reactive and start being responsive. You stop seeking closure and start creating clarity. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? That's the final stage of inner power, unshakable serenity. Not the peace they can give or take, but the kind you build quietly, day by day, until it becomes who you are. how they feel your absence seat first. Your silence feels like nothing to them. They interpret it as surrender, proof that they were right to walk away. They mistake your stillness for weakness, your calm for defeat. That's because they're still trapped in the noise, in the constant need for reaction, validation, and emotional feedback loops that make them feel alive. But silence is a strange thing. It begins softly, almost invisible. Then it grows, not louder, but heavier. Because the human mind isn't designed for unfinished stories. When there's no response, it starts writing its own. And that's when they begin to feel you, not in presence, but in absence. Your stillness becomes a mirror that forces reflection. They replay conversations, remembering the words they ignored, the patience they took for granted. They start noticing the calm they used to mock, the gentleness they once found boring. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Your silence becomes a color they can't wash off. It lingers in their mind, subtle but unshakable, reminding them that not everyone can be replaced, especially those who mastered peace instead of drama. Silence doesn't shout, but it stays. And when the world gets quiet for them, when new distractions fade, they'll hear it clearly, your absence, echoing like a lesson they didn't want but needed. Over time, something shifts. At first, they rationalized your silence. They're bitter, they're hurt, they'll come back. But you didn't. You built peace instead of narratives. And peace is louder than closure. They start to wander, not because they miss you in the romantic sense, but because they miss the stability your presence brought. They remember how calm they felt when you were near, how safe your patience made them feel. That memory becomes uncomfortable because it forces them to confront who they were when they still had access to you. This is the law of emotional contrast. People often don't recognize peace until they return to chaos. They compare your silence to the noise around them, the shallow connections, the temporary highs, the endless distractions. And without realizing it, they start to crave what they once dismissed, stillness. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more. That is poor." They begin to feel poor, not in possessions, but in peace. Because they spent their calm recklessly and now must live in the debt of their own choices. But the Stoic lesson here is not about satisfaction in their regret. It's about realizing you were never the storm. You were the eye within it. And once people lose that kind of presence, they eventually understand. They didn't walk away from you. They walked away from balance. There comes a moment, maybe months later, when they see something that reminds them of you. A song, a place, a phrase. And suddenly, that memory doesn't sting with anger anymore. It stings with awareness. That's when your silence reaches them, not through guilt, but gravity. They realize they never really won the power struggle, because true power was never about control. It was about composure. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that's the paradox they face. They thought leaving made them free. But freedom without discipline turns into emptiness. They see you now, not as someone they conquered, but as someone who conquered the need to respond. You don't have to say a word. Your energy already changed the story. They feel it in how your peace makes their noise sound cheap. They feel it when your calm presence lives rent-free in their restless mind. And while they're still searching for new voices to fill the silence, you're learning to enjoy it. You're no longer haunted by absence. You're defined by it. Because you've learned that silence, when guided by wisdom, is not void. It's vibration, it's message, it's proof that the loudest statement a soul can make is serenity. That's how they feel your absence, not as loss, but as a reminder of what true strength actually looks like. Calm, grounded, untouchable. Living well in silence isn't a moment. It's a practice, and like any discipline, it's something you build, not something you wait for. Every day gives you small opportunities to choose stillness. When a message doesn't need a reply, when a coworker's drama invites you in, when your mind starts racing toward things you can't control, each moment is a quiet crossroad, noise or peace, reaction or response. The Stoics lived this way centuries ago, but their wisdom fits our modern chaos perfectly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are disturbed by external things, it is not by the things themselves, but by your judgment of them." That's your reminder. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to match the volume of the world. Start with simple rituals. Before checking your phone in the morning, breathe before responding to tension. Pause before assuming intent. Observe. These small acts of quiet resistance protect your mind in ways that no external armor ever could. Silence is not absence. It's awareness. It's the space between stimulus and wisdom. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that life was never asking you to shout louder. It was asking you to listen deeper. We live in an age where silence feels suspicious. If you're not posting, you're irrelevant. If you're not reacting, you're cold. If you're not explaining, people fill the blanks for you. But Stoic silence thrives in exactly this kind of world, because it's rebellion through restraint. It's the art of not offering your peace for public consumption. Social media has turned reaction into currency. Every click, every comment, every outrage is a transaction of attention, but attention is energy, and once it's spent, it rarely returns. So, when you refuse to feed that system, when you stay silent, still, selective, you reclaim your time, your focus, your soul. Epictetus would have called this freedom from externals. You learn to withdraw from the noise without withdrawing from life. You observe more, speak less, and act only when necessary. You choose your words the way an artist chooses color, intentionally, sparingly, beautifully, and something incredible happens. The less you explain, the more peace you keep, the less you justify, the more grounded you feel. You begin to understand that peace doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly, like dusk after a storm. When you stop performing, you start living. When you stop chasing attention, you start cultivating meaning. That's Stoicism in motion. Not philosophy in books, but practice in daily life. Living in silence doesn't mean living alone. It means living aligned. You start choosing your peace with the same loyalty you once gave to chaos. You begin saying no to things that don't feed your spirit, not out of arrogance, but self-respect. You spend more time with yourself, not because others are unworthy, but because solitude no longer scares you. It becomes sacred, the space where your thoughts soften, your energy resets, your identity breathes. Seneca wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." That's the truth of modern exhaustion. We scatter ourselves so thin across the noise that we forget to exist deeply anywhere. Silence pulls you back, into presence, into purpose, into depth. You begin to see that you were never meant to live in constant reaction. You were meant to live in conscious creation, and in that stillness, you rediscover what peace actually feels like. Not excitement, not escape, but quiet clarity. From that place, every decision becomes simpler. You no longer seek to prove anything. You no longer compete for attention. You simply move, calm, deliberate, unbothered. That is the essence of Stoic living. To carry the calm wherever you go. To speak only when truth adds value. And to find meaning in moments the world overlooks. Silence doesn't shrink you. It expands you. And when the world finally gets loud again, you'll smile quietly, knowing that your peace is no longer negotiable. Look at where you began. The silence that once terrified you has become the space that protects you. You started this journey wondering how someone could erase you so easily. But what you've learned is that they never erased you. They only revealed what was never truly secure through pain. You discovered perspective through rejection. You found redirection through silence. You found strength. This is the paradox of Stoic living. The things that seem to break you are the same things that shape you. Every unanswered message, every quiet night, every moment of restraint was not wasted. It was building something invisible. Composure. Epictetus taught, no great thing is created suddenly, and your peace, the one you now carry effortlessly, was not born from ease. It was forged in restraint, in stillness, in the decision not to beg for what was already gone. When you chose silence, you didn't disappear. You evolved. You became someone who no longer trades dignity for attention, who no longer confuses noise with meaning, who no longer seeks validation from those incapable of giving it. Now you understand. Being discarded didn't make you powerless. It made you aware. And awareness is the foundation of every kind of freedom. There's a different kind of happiness that comes after chaos. It's quieter, but infinitely deeper. It's the relief of not needing to prove yourself anymore. It's the strength of knowing that no one's approval is worth your peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That's not just philosophy. It's the daily art of choosing what gets your energy and what doesn't. You've learned that silence isn't isolation. It's insulation. It keeps out the noise that used to drain you. It turns pain into perspective, distance into discipline, and absence into awareness. You don't chase closure anymore, because you realize closure doesn't come from others. It comes from acceptance. You don't fear solitude, because solitude is now the proof of self-trust. And when people try to pull you into old patterns, you recognize them as echoes, not invitations. The Stoics believe that the world will always test your peace. That's how you know it's real. You can't control who stays or leaves, what people say, or how they see you, but you can always control the tone of your own soul. That tone, quiet, calm, self-contained, is what separates strength from reaction, and it's what turns silence into something divine. Not a void, but a vibration that says, I am whole, I am free, I am enough. Double quotes. So, if you're watching this and still feeling the ache of being forgotten, let this be your reminder. You are not what they abandoned. You are what remains. The calm after the storm, the lesson after the loss, the peace after the noise. The Stoics didn't teach detachment to make you cold. They taught it to make you clear. Clear about where your worth comes from. Clear about what deserves your energy. Clear about who you are when the world goes silent. They may never apologize. They may never understand the weight of what they did. But you've already won, not by revenge, but by refusal. You refuse to let bitterness rewrite your story. You refuse to let anger define your strength. You refuse to trade your peace for their attention. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And your bravery was in staying still when everything in you wanted to shout. That is freedom, quiet, powerful, irreversible. Now, let your silence continue to speak, not as defiance, but as declaration. Live well, live calmly, live like someone who no longer needs to be heard to be seen. And if this message resonated with you, let it stay with you. Carry it into your next morning, your next decision, your next breath, because every time you choose silence over reaction, you are not losing a voice, you are gaining yourself. If you found strength in these words, like this video and subscribe to StoicCraft. Together, we'll keep learning how to master peace in a noisy world.